Hi, everyone. My name is Devaki Nambiar, and I'm a health policy and systems researcher based out of India. So in the course of the work that we do here in India, we are involved in a lot of research partnerships. Many of you are probably in the same situation. All kinds of partnerships, actually. Partnerships with communities who reside in the places where we conduct our research. Partnership with NGOs or community-based organizations who have been involved closely with the communities that we're partnering with. Also partnerships with government actors, implementers, health providers, who are duty bearers in the context of the health of these populations. There are also partnerships between academic institutions. This could be in India, or it could be with other partners in what you could call the Global South, or I like to call the majority world, or partnerships with institutions in the Global North. Countries that are trying to deal with the legacy of coloniality in the conduct of their research. You can call these the global north, but quite often they're dealing with pretty major ethical legacies of their own with respect to research partnerships. So there are a lot of questions that arise in the course of these research collaborations and partnerships. So for example, I am often wondering, with communities, are we giving enough opportunities for communities to voice their concerns, to have equity in the priority setting of research topics that we seek to undertake? Are our partnerships with community equitable? Another question that arises has to do with academic institutions, particularly ones in the global north. And I'm wondering, is my team having enough opportunities for authorship, for contribution, for travel to conferences, for leadership? There are real questions of power in those. Another has to do with managing expectations that donors may have in partnerships we have with them with respect to delivering on the expectations they may have in situations that are highly dynamic, may even be volatile, or contending with emergencies or disruptions. Is our research partnership resilient, right? So these are the types of questions that some of which you may also have. And I'm pleased to say that finally there is a forum for us to start to think about them. And that is provided by the Global Forum on Bioethics in Research. Now, this is a 2-day meeting that's held every year that seeks to unpack different ethical issues in the conduct of research. And this year's theme is actually equitable research partnerships. Over the period of 2 days, we do a variety of things. So the agenda is structured around discussion of real-life case studies, considerations and questions around the structures of governance around different ethical issues, in this case, research partnerships, as well as other opportunities for small group discussion in addition to plenaries. The theme for the Global Forum on Bioethics in Research of 2025 is Reimagining Research Partnerships, Equity, Power, and Resilience. And I'm pleased to say that that sort of really corresponds to the types of issues that arise for many of us. And the planning committee that I'm lucky to be a part of has been working on developing an interesting and engaging program. And what we want to really address is the core issue of equity and really start to reimagine what we mean even by equity. And so this year, we're interested also in conceptual papers that are looking at issue framing and conceptual issues as well. And the goal of the forum, of course, is to bring together minds and hearts and really advance our understanding and our application of ethical principles and practices in the conduct of research with a core focus on partnerships this year. And so what we're looking for is contributions. How can we reimagine without you? We're interested, as I sort of mentioned earlier, in 3 types of major contributions. We're interested in real-life case studies of research partnerships, not so much the challenges you face, though that's important and a key starting point, but also how challenges have been addressed or partnerships have been created to avoid the typical types of pitfalls that one comes across in research partnerships. We're also interested in that governance question, institutional arrangements, guidelines, regulations, and the coordination of these in research partnerships and how that's gone. As I mentioned earlier, this time around, we're interested in conceptual papers as well to understand, what do we mean by equity? What do we mean by resilience? What do these keywords suggest in different contexts? What are their strengths and limitations? So we welcome you to provide your contributions, and there's information on the website on how to do that. Even our background paper is on there. But for now, I hope to have gotten your minds churning, and we'll hand over to Chelsea and Marlyn, who are co-authors with me on the background paper and part of the planning committee, to tell you a bit more. Hope to see you at the forum.
Global health research partnerships have existed in some capacity for decades, and in many ways, acknowledging the inequities between contemporary research partners requires also acknowledging the historical and often colonial asymmetries in the socioeconomic development and healthcare in which these partnerships form and function currently. Research partnerships are often seen as critical, if not ethically mandatory, for tackling the large burden of diseases which disproportionately affect communities living in the global south. And this was highlighted by the 1090 gap that was published in the 1990s, where it was shown that only 10% of the money spent on health research is focused on diseases affecting 90% of the global population. So, with this framing in mind, the interest in what a fair or equitable global health research partnership looks like has arisen mostly in the last 10 to 15 years or so, particularly with increasing visibility and attention towards how researchers and institutions formally collaborate with one another. What are our obligations towards one another as researchers and collaborators? What are values that underpin these obligations, and what mechanisms do we have in place or should we have in place to enforce them? Concerns about logistical inequalities in health research partnerships are not new and at this point are fairly widely acknowledged, although are shifting under increased global scrutiny in the past couple of years. And there is a growing wealth of observations of inequities, and these include things like partnership case reports, qualitative stakeholder assessments, and demonstration of unjust bibliographic and publication trends. And many of these topics can be found elaborated on further in the GFBR pre-conference paper. However, these depictions capture only small parts of existing research partnership models, and the pluralistic and entrenched nature of these inequities can make it difficult to develop pragmatic, evidence informed interventions that meaningfully promote partnership equity. And so, also included in the paper are a number of existing research partnership equity guidelines, frameworks, and toolkits that have been previously proposed and published. And our goal at the GFBR this year is to expand on this knowledge, both normatively and empirically, and reimagine how we define and approach global health research partnerships as a global community.
So at the GFBR this year, we are thinking about international collaborations and partnerships in two ways. The first is asking big questions about what partnerships mean, where they come from, and what the future of partnerships are. The second framing we are drawing on is how do we operationalize global partnerships? So the first big question in relation to partnerships we are asking is, what do we mean by equitable global health research partnerships? There, we are interested in questions such as, what does the framing of global and local facilitate in health research partnerships, and what does it hinder? Should we still be using the term partnerships as a way to describe how research in global health is done? And does this term accurately capture the variety of dynamics at work? Is the term partnership misleading or representative? And if so, what should be used instead? Another question could be, should we evaluate different kinds of partnership models, for example, north-south, south-south, or north-north, as morally or ethically different? In other words, should how partnerships, given the larger histories in which these different configurations emerge, be of relevance for how we make ethical judgments about partnerships? What does defining partners by geography mean for partnerships, and how does it influence perceptions of equity? How ought we be defining partnerships between geographic locations that recognize a variety of material and discursive inequities? Should we aim for language and models that are aspirational? That is, that they seek to overcome those differentials? Or should we draw on language that captures differentials which run the risk of reinscribing inequities? Should we include local research communities and knowledge, given that it's a key feature of partnerships? What principles should guide its inclusion, and what are the limits of such inclusion? Another thematic question we are interested in is how, given the history of partnerships, how are partnerships and what is the connection or disconnection between equitable research partnerships and larger economic and social and healthcare development goals. So one question could be, what does the interplay between development and scientific research mean for mechanisms of accountability or feasibility of equity in research partnerships? In what ways do these connections promote or detract access to healthcare in under-resourced settings? And do partnerships by definition promote mechanisms of economic or health dependence for partners in the global south by sustaining connections and collaborations with the global north? A third theme we are interested in is, what should the future of global health research partnerships look like? One question we are interested in under this sub-theme is, what ethical goals should we be targeting in our health partnerships? What are some values besides equity? What are the key principles that define a good global health research partnership, and what values underpin these principles? We could also ask, how can research partnerships be protected when there are massive political and unilateral shifts in power and access on the global stage in this current political moment? Another question could be, partnerships in global health may support or collude with unjust structures and systems. How can partnerships not only avoid this, but actively resist being complicit with these larger systems? What are the obligations of different actors to shape these partnerships towards developing more equitable and just outcomes? And then, should bioethics be charged with setting the ethical trajectory of partnerships in global health?
So, the third question in the paper tries to address issues around accountability. When there are so many actors and influences on how, when, and where global health research partnerships are conducted, the issue of accountability becomes fairly opaque, both in terms of accountability, partnership to external structures, and then also for accountability within the partnership itself. In terms of external structures, there are actors such as global health research funders and academic journals, both of which are typically based in the global north, that have considerable influence and power over how research is designed, implemented, and disseminated, and also how, more generally, systems of knowing and understanding in global health science are built. Traditionally, pathways of accountability between research partnerships and these external structures are unilateral and often dictated by the more powerful structure, like a funder or journal. And so, how these external actors are held accountable becomes a lot more nebulous and variable. And when we have these massive shifts in global power structures, which is particularly relevant in the moment we're living in now, these mechanisms for accountability, or lack thereof, become all the more important. Versus internal to the partnership, the principle of equity is often interpreted as requiring that accountability be bilateral, meaning that there are mechanisms by which both partners can hold one another accountable. And where we often see a major challenge is a tension between what individual researchers and colleagues view as an ethical and professional obligation to one another and what the institutions they represent and are a part of require under institutional policy and procedures. So, an example is the disproportionate allotment of indirect costs between institutions based in the global north versus the global south, or something like professional advancement metrics that favor activities that encourage self promotion over collaborating and supporting other people, and in many ways end up discouraging spending time on capacity building measures for partners based in the global south. So, how are individuals supposed to support themselves and others while working in systems that often feel counterproductive or inhibitory to what? And what are some of the successful ways we can change institutional cultures to better support equitable collaborative research practices? And then for our last question in the GFBR conference this year is around lesson learned in preparing for future global and public health emergencies. As we learned from the COVID pandemic, public health emergencies raise unique research ethics questions owing to this pressing need for efficiency and sometimes catastrophic risk to human life. And there are additional obligations, especially in, but not limited to, the context of emergency preparedness and response and research in under-resourced settings in the Global South, that are further elaborated on in the pre-conference paper. Sometimes these obligations or needs are in direct tension with the practices that best promote equity and fairness in research partnerships. For example, a trade-off between drafting something like an in-depth memorandum of understanding, which can take a lot of time and requires a lot of back and forth exchange, with the need for efficiency and expedited research processes when human lives are at risk. And so bioethics and the global health ethics communities are well positioned to make a contribution to this space, both conceptually and also empirically, in terms of what sorts of values should be guiding our decision making early in a public health emergency, and how do these trade-offs start to vary over time.
Thank you for your interest in GFBR. Please see the GFBR website for the background paper and for details on how to apply. You can either apply as a participant or as a presenter, and we look forward to receiving your application.